Hello, amazing people. Welcome back to Building Your Health Esteem. I'm DrJeromeCraig, your host once again, and we are wrapping up a three-part series on sleep. Now, this is a complicated topic because sleep isn't related to just one thing. And doing these podcasts, this is not my intention to reverse disordered sleep or some serious issues, okay? So these episodes are really for those who are interested in improving their sleep and don't have any major dysregulation. So if you are having severe sleep issues, please seek professional help. And if somebody is not quite there yet, I'm hoping you get something out of this three-part series. So in our third little section here, we're talking about nutrition and supplementation around sleep. And when you look at nutrition, this is part of our lifestyle, and supplementation can fit into nutrition. So this is an important lever to pull when we are looking at improving our sleep. However, pills are not always the cure to the ills. So supplementation is just supposed to be that, supplementing other things that you are putting into place already. So the first part about nutrition that we're going to address is that rhythm that we spoke about last time. If you're somebody who eats willy-nilly and finds yourself snacking on something late at night, a little bit before bed, you don't have a regular dinner hour, you are not sending the signals to your body that your day is coming to an end. And so you're going to run into some trouble. So the first thing around nutrition is to look at, do you have a rhythm and a pattern there? I'm not going to belabor that part too much because I think you can sense from the previous issue that rhythm is super important to setting body clocks and things like that. So the lowest hanging fruit to talk about in nutrition is what not to do. And caffeine is the most obvious, and caffeine is found in chocolates and teas and coffee, obviously. There's a lot of caffeinated beverages out there these days. Avoid them if you have sleep problems, you want to improve your sleep, just don't do them in the afternoon. Caffeine is known to block these receptors in the brain called adenosine receptors. Adenosine is associated with the onset of drowsiness, so it's a very, very important part of falling asleep. Don't do caffeine in the afternoon. How about alcohol? Alcohol is a big issue. Alcohol does tend to make a lot of people drowsy. It can help you fall asleep, but alcohol does impair the quality of your sleep. And that's pretty well established. There's quite a bit of an association here. Alcohol use disorders are associated with insomnia as well. And so how alcohol really messes with sleep, there's a lot of thought around that. But one of the things that I think is a big issue is that your body has to ramp up its metabolism, its energy through the liver to detoxify alcohol. And once that process is done, you're going to be a hot, sweaty mess and you're not going to sleep very well. All right, the other thing to note is how diet is structured throughout the day. There are a lot of people following a variety of different eating patterns these days, whether it's a high carbohydrate, low fat, whatever. We've got to watch out. Extremely low carbohydrate diets will affect some people negatively because carbohydrates, there's some indication that it decreases cortisol in the short term. So if you're living a super stressed, go life, you come home, you have some carbohydrate-rich meal at night, it will tend to lower that cortisol, and that is good because cortisol and melatonin are inversely related. As cortisol rises, it typically keeps melatonin suppressed. So we want that cortisol to go down so melatonin continues to come up and gets you ready for bed. Now, another thing to think about is hydration around sleep. Too many people wake up parched, but just go for the coffee and don't really get the electrolytes and the waters and everything else in the system. And then later on in the day, they're super thirsty and they're drinking a bunch. And that will obviously disturb your sleep because you have to go pee in the middle of the night. So my recommendations are typically to load water pretty heavily in the earlier part of the day because you have lost a lot of moisture just through respiration at night. So hydrate early so you don't have to play catch up and pee because that messes with your sleep. So overall, the recommendation for the average person is to stop eating about 3 hours before bed. I think this works. Yes, there are some people who eat right up to bed and it works for them. But for most people, let's focus on eating and allowing your body to digest, metabolize, and all of that good stuff before you get into bed at night. This is actually better for your digestive system as well. And there's quite a bit of correlation here with late meals and too big meals late at night being associated with GERD and reflux and a whole host of other issues there. So just pay attention to that. Now, this little section here is going to be a segue into supplementation, because magnesium deficiency and vitamin D deficiency, those are actually relatively high in our society right now. And yes, we can take pills and supplements to aid that, but let's look at diet. Magnesium is not very well supplemented in your average processed food products. And we do, as a society, eat a lot more processed food than we ever have before. So leafy greens, fish, nuts and seeds, those are good sources of magnesium. If you're getting those in your diet, you may not be deficient in magnesium. Now, magnesium also plays a very important role in the production and manufacturing of vitamin D in the system. And there's quite a bit of studies showing that vitamin D insufficiency and deficiency is associated with sleep problems as well. So look at that. Now let's talk about supplementing of those things. If you do supplement with magnesium, there are ways that that can inhibit your sleep. A is, the recommendation is typically take it before bed to aid with your relaxation and your sleep. Watch out how much water you're drinking to get that 350 or 300 to 400 milligram dose of magnesium that is recommended. I think you will do pretty well if you actually split magnesium throughout the day, so you're not taking so much and having to drink as much fluids to get your pills or your powders down late at night. Now, magnesium in a high dose does tend to create diarrhea for some individuals. It creates a little digestive distress, so pay attention to that. Once again, splitting that up throughout the day might be good for you. Now, the most used supplement out there for sleep is melatonin. Now, melatonin is a end-of-the-line neurotransmitter, right? We talk about serotonin and how that signals the pineal gland to make melatonin, and that's really, really great. But you want to make it more than you want to take it. If you are somebody who doesn't get enough daylight exposure in the morning and you get too much artificial light exposure at night, melatonin probably will not work for you very well. The dosages recommended for melatonin go from 0.5 milligrams, and they run pretty high. There are some people who take 50 milligrams of melatonin a night. Now, I used to really worry about that because I thought if you took that much melatonin, you inhibit your natural production of melatonin. But if you look at the studies, there's nothing to show that fairly long-term dosage of things up to 50 milligrams of melatonin cause some problems. But before you run out and start taking 50 milligrams of melatonin, that is for correcting a disordered sleeping pattern, and I wouldn't work with really high doses of melatonin without a professional who's used to dosing higher doses of melatonin. The other thing is, if you fall asleep readily, but your problem is waking up in the middle of the night, melatonin is probably not the supplement that you need to consider, because that whole effect of melatonin is bringing sleep on sooner. It hinges on that. So if we take melatonin or we make enough melatonin to help us fall asleep, it will keep us asleep. But if we have a hard time falling asleep, we need to look at something else. Okay, so those something else's are typically something like lavender, believe it or not, one of the better studied herbal medications, and its synergistic effect working with lemon balm. Now, these work in reducing anxious thoughts and anxiety and easing tension. They work well with things like magnesium and melatonin. And so if we can release ourselves from those intrusive thoughts that keep us from falling asleep, these are the kinds of supplements I would look at. You got to watch out for lavender. There is something in lavender that we look for. It's called selectin. And if people aim for about 80 milligrams to start for that. But According to the National Institutes of Health and the Endocrine Society, you've got to watch out for the estrogenic properties in taking lavender at higher doses or for long periods of time. And that's mostly a concern for those who take in certain kinds of contraception and for men. So just pay attention to that, okay? Another thing that people tend to use as a stack to make them drowsy, it works as a sedative, is things like hops, valerian, and passiflora or passion flower. And this is to help people fall asleep. The problem with this is a lot of people report feeling drowsy in the morning, and I think if you need a sedative to fall asleep and to feel well rested, that's an indication that we need to work on other aspects of our lives. Things to think about with magnesium. I did mention before, too much magnesium can cause diarrhea. There are other things that lower your magnesium that I just want to address. The elderly tend to have poorer mineral status. Athletes and those who sweat a lot and drive themselves, they tend to be at risk for poor mineral status. And certain medications, especially proton pump inhibitors and diuretics, those are going to give you some problems. And then looking at disease conditions like diabetes, people who have type 2 diabetes, there tends to be low magnesium status. And there's actually been interventional studies just dosing magnesium to improve blood sugar handling. So, moving on from those kinds of supplements, I think that one other thing that we should discuss relates to the previous episode of talking about temperature. And that's a supplement known as glycine. Glycine is an amino acid. It also functions as a neurotransmitter. And the way it helps with sleep is that it typically lowers your core body temperature. And so that can be very, very handy for bringing on sleep, because you spoke about how that body temperature drops and that's part of your body getting ready to fall asleep. Glycine also tends to increase serotonin levels, and serotonin is something that is converted to melatonin in the pineal gland. So moving on, what about all those other products out there? Well, the efficacy of most sleep aids outside of what I already mentioned is pretty limited. The studies don't always point out there's a huge placebo effect in most of these supplements and medications that we take, but the willingness for people to run out and purchase these things just points to a greater problem, and that we are living fairly imbalanced lives where we're not taking enough time to invite sleep into our lives. In the past 10 years, Americans have doubled their spending on over-the-counter sleep aids, just walking in and self-medicating on whatever pops out at them from the shelves. And we're spending close to $500 million a year at this stage, where it was under 230 or something like that 10 years ago. So I think that we need to focus on a lot of these other factors. And so next week, we're going to dive into another little mini-series, a 3-parter on another topic that I believe will help us live our lives as best as we can. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about living this life well. So this isn't only about diet. This isn't only about sleep. This is so much about mentality and how we think about our health and what is possible for us. Have a great weekend, folks, and I look forward to any sort of feedback that anyone has. Give the show a review. Let me know what you think I should cover. And also, I do read emails. If you want to send them to me, the email is in the show notes. Take care. Have a great weekend. Peace.